Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of I Was Raised in a Religious Cult Stories from the Other Side. My name is Scar, and today I'm joined by my partner who goes by Lost in Japan online. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, I am Japan. I go by that online.
Yes, he is here
It's my whole bio.
for pretty much that's his whole personality. um,
Yeah, emotional support man
Moral support,
thing.
everything. So, before we get started, as usual, I always like to put some trigger warnings at the start just in case it's a subject that someone might be sensitive to. If I feel like during the episode there's something that I forgot to include, I'll try to mention that. So our main trigger warnings are for religious and child abuse, which are kind of like the common ones that kind of keep reoccurring. Also, inhalant abuse, talk of hospitals, the death of a child. If those are things that you are sensitive to, just please keep that in mind as we jump into this episode. Usually, how we do the episodes is I've at least up till now been going by what grade I was in school, just because it's a little easier to mark those times. Last time we left off on the 5th grade. This time we're going to. Oh, I don't know what that was. Sorry. My nose did a weird thing. So this time we will be talking about my experiences during the 6th grade time in my life. Let's jump in. So the first thing I kind of wanted to lay out, whenever 6th grade started, right before it, basically we were getting moved early to the high school because the original 5th and 6th grade building was falling apart even while we were there when I was in 5th grade, and they ended up tearing it down and building a 5th, 6th grade area at the high school. So what that meant was I was now going to be going to school in the same building as my brother Stone. And the problem with this was that my brother, I knew if he found out that I had a boyfriend, he would snitch. So I was really scared about that. So I told my boyfriend that we couldn't be together. Because officially, because I didn't want my brother to find out. Obviously, friend of a friend of a friend would, maybe tell. So I told my boyfriend that I liked so much. I was like, hey, we have to break up. And he got really upset about it. Of course, he was sad, but we would still meet up and hold hands and talk. It was weird because I didn't really feel necessarily like we were broken up, or I didn't want that feeling, but he was crushed by it, which was completely valid. I was definitely in the wrong in that situation. I was just trying not to get caught, and I definitely don't think I explained the situation to him well enough, so it broke his heart. And when I realized that I never saw my brother and we didn't have any mutuals that would be able to tell, I was like, well, we could be boyfriend girlfriend again. But he ended up moving away. So it
Because
was
of the
kind of,
sorrow.
yeah, definitely, it was
That was the
definitely
only
the
reason
heartbreak.
why.
Yeah, 6th grade heartbreak. What, 10, 11, somewhere in
You did
there.
that to so many boys.
I did not. You act like I'm a little heartbreaker or something.
I could see it.
Nor. Anyway, after he moved away, he ended up, through one of our mutual friends, sending a letter to me. And it was talking about his new school, how he was having a really hard time. He was like, oh yeah, I have really been missing you. And then the letter kind of took a dark turn, and he's like, yeah, I'm struggling so much that I've started sniffing permanent markers. And I was like, what? So he was like, yeah, I've been sniffing permanent markers, and there was even a couple marks on the letter, and I was like, I was
I know
like,
it's not supposed to laugh, but
it was, yes, no, I can see the humor in it. It's definitely out of pocket for sure. I was like, oh my god, I was not equipped for this. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of wrote him a letter back. I was like, I miss you too. I care about you too. I'm sorry. I did put in it you need to get help for that, like that's not healthy, that can't be good for your brain. um so yeah, which, to be fair, as an update for adult life, he's doing well. He has kids and a wife, and I think he was able to move past a lot of the stuff. He had ADHD, and I think that posed a lot of issues for him. And growing up, even though we did know things about like ADHD and autism, it wasn't, we didn't have the resources that we do now. I mean, we still are very far behind with the information we have on that, especially for AFAB people, but I think he was just struggling. And I'm glad that things worked out for him. That genuinely just makes me happy, because he was a good kid, but just bad time in his life. But I never heard from him again after that. I did have other like little boyfriends this year. This story, I think, will probably lighten the mood a little bit because it's kind of funny, and it will also kind of bring us into something else I wanted to talk about. So this boyfriend I accidentally got. It was a good friend of mine. We were in class, and during this class we would have designated reading time. So basically we could go get a book, go sit quietly and read, which we did not end up doing that day. We decided to go in this little corner, and we were just giggling and laughing about stuff and being really goofy. And I got really cracked up over something that we were talking about, and I farted so freaking loud, which made us just cry laugh. And he's like, dude, the people with headphones on turned around. That was so loud. I was like, it was funny though. At least we were laughing in the moment. Anyway, it was so loud that the whole class just erupts in laughter, and thankfully they didn't know it was me. I think I would have been more embarrassed if they would have known it was me. I was already kind of embarrassed, but we were laughing, so it made it better. Anyway, at the end of the day, I was waiting in the bus line, and he comes running up, just like shoves this note in my hands and runs off, doesn't say anything. And it was him being like, do you want to be my little girlfriend? Like the cute little 5th, 6th grade kind of stuff. So I was like, yes, because I liked how we laughed together.
That fart got him going.
The fart got him. I'm telling ya. He just, what can I say? I'm just gonna not go any further with those thoughts because that was out of pocket. Anyway, I did end up breaking up with him later this year because basically this was the year my parents started driving us around to different towns, looking at houses, like, hey, we're gonna buy a house, we're gonna get out of our situation. And my mom had us pack up everything in the house, including like everything in my room. And so this was kind of the beginning of the era of living out of boxes. And it added to a pre-existing issue I had where I would throw everything I owned away. So every few months, if I felt like I had accumulated too much stuff, I would just take everything I owned, save for a few things, and just throw it all away. I'm going to go on a bit of a side tangent here. So the reason that this originally started was because as a kid, I would struggle to keep my room clean. So would my brother. I think that was a little neurodivergence, but I think kids also kind of just struggle to keep their rooms clean. I think that's pretty normal, between school and life and learning how to function as a person. So what my mom would do if we didn't keep our rooms clean, she would just kind of snap one day, go into our rooms, throw everything we owned away. Which it happened to my brother quite a few times, and I know it pissed my dad off at one point because my dad had given my brother all of his old Star Wars stuff, which actually by that point had gotten to be worth like a pretty good amount of money. And she did it only once to me, and the reason that I had let it get that bad was she was like, you have one more day to clean your room up. And the thing with ADHD, it's very hard to focus. I would go on these big tangents and think I had enough time to reorganize everything. I was pretty young too, but I was in the middle of cleaning, and I used to get really bad earaches as a kid, and this day I had one that was so bad that I was literally like on the floor just writhing in pain. And I didn't like telling my parents when I had them because, well, to be fair, my mom was not good at taking care of my, like, she would take bobby pins and dig the wax out of my ears, but not safely or well. She would like stab my eardrums, which I think that might be why I have some hearing issues today. And like I would get these infections, and I remember I had this really, really bad one to the point that like I was so dizzy I would fall out of bed while I was laying down, and my mom ended up pouring rubbing alcohol in my ears, which
Jesus.
it was so painful. It felt like fire. I that is the only way I can think to describe it. My ears burned so bad, and I screamed, and my mom got mad at me for screaming, and she's like, stop whining and go get dinner. I was like, anyway, I got off track. So anyway, I couldn't clean my room because of my earache, and the next day, which I think my parents later that night found out I had the earache, because obviously there's only so much you can hide it. When you walk in and your kid's on the floor rolling around crying because their ear hurts, it's a little hard to hide. And I thought because I wasn't feeling well, my mom would give me an extra day, but she didn't. So she said, get out, I'm getting rid of your stuff. So she sent me to the living room, and I go on the couch, and I'm crying, and I can hear her throwing all my stuff away. And then she's like dragging the trash can of my belongings through the living room, and she's like, why are you crying? I'm like, what do you think? You're throwing all my stuff away. My mom may not be the most empathetic person.
You think? That's like the understatement of the year.
So this is why I started kind of throwing all my stuff away. I think in my brain, if I can throw it away, if I don't have much stuff, it's going to be easier to keep my room clean. So I would keep very few things. And if I threw it away before my mom could, she wouldn't get the satisfaction of hurting me. If I hurt myself, at least it was this was how I had control in the house, was getting rid of what I owned. And control issues were a huge thing, and I think still are. I feel like I still struggle with weird stuff and needing like I won't get in a vehicle and drive with other people. I have to be the driver. Like that's not probably healthy. It's like a huge problem, and I've worked on a lot of things, and I will be talking more about how I am as a person nowadays later on when we kind of get to that point. But so anyway, we had all of our stuff packed up. I'm so sorry. I know I went on a big tangent. We're going to wrap back around here. So we had all of our stuff packed up, and every moment of free time, basically on the weekends when we weren't like after service or whatever, we would all pack in the car, and we would drive to, I think it was Cotter, Arkansas. My parents really liked that place. I think that's what it's called. I remember thinking it sounded like cottage, and there was like a place to swim that was really nice, and they had a bunch of really nice old houses. I could be wrong. I was very young. But anyway, we would go drive there. We would drive around looking for houses, and I remember this one day we looked at some really beautiful houses, and there was this one that my heart wanted so badly. Like, this is the kind of room that I imagined, like, this is the kind of room you would see in movies, and the kind of house that you would see in movies, like the protagonist would have, or like what I imagined protagonists in books bedrooms looking like. It was this old house, and the room that I would have had, it had these big, huge windows, which I've always loved windows. Japan can attest to that.
That is true.
I love windows. I love light.
They are a window.
What?
So. I don't know.
You're a dork. Anyway, it had these big windows, and I remember the front windows, I think, were like even shaped. They were like shaped like chapel windows, which I've always kind of liked the way those look. And they faced out onto this street, and it was the kind of street that I had always wanted to live in, where like you could see all the other houses, and it felt like anytime I read books or watched movies, like kids would always get to play with the other kids, and like we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and the only friend I had was up on the hill. So I was like, I don't know, I got really excited because I also had my own door to the outside and the sunset coming in through the windows. So to me, I'm like, this is magical, this is beautiful, this is like so amazing. And I was so convinced we were gonna move because, like, obviously my parents are telling us, yeah, we're gonna move. But we never did. And I had ended up breaking up with that boyfriend because I told him, yeah, we're gonna move soon, I don't want to get too attached. But then we never moved that year, which was kind of awkward. And I lived out of boxes for years because for years we were like, oh yeah, we're gonna move. And it was just kind of like this, always. That's kind of how my whole childhood was. Everything was always unsure, and I got promised a lot of things that didn't happen. And I also hated where we lived. I think we all kind of hated it. Like, we would be driving home from, like, the meeting. This is so messed up. We would be driving home from, like, a Kingdom Hall meeting, and we would be like, maybe the house burned down while we were gone. Like, as a family, fantasizing about this.
Yeah, that don't sound okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's healthy. Definitely not healthy at all. I don't think my parents should have fantasized about something like that with us at all. I don't think that was okay. And
No,
I don't know.
not at all.
Looking back on that is so wild. I think that's another reason why I also tried not to get attached to anything that I owned, which this also sent me into a weird thing over the next few years of, I had this backpack that I would take everywhere with my most prized possessions in it. Anywhere I would go, I would take that with me. I kind of wonder if that might have also been the cause of it.
Probably, yeah.
Just real healthy.
Yeah.
So we also put our house up for sale. And I remember we had to deep clean it, and my mom had us keep it, like, perfect. At all times, it had to be perfect. You know, don't leave a cup out. Don't live in the house, basically. We weren't allowed to live in our house. And this is so embarrassing to look back on. So when we were showing the house to people, my brother and I would put out Watchtower and Awake magazines with little signs that said, you can take one. For
That's
the people.
Kind of rough.
That's right. Oh, God. I look back and I'm just like...
Because we're talking about it in like a discussion vein, not to backtrack too much, but do you think like this was something that your mom was doing, like because like how her brain works, or was it something that you think your dad was feeding you or feeding her? Because like your dad's kind of also like that have like grandiose promises of being like, oh, I'll do this and we're gonna move, we're gonna do this, or and would you think it was something like that, or do you think it was just like a combination of the two?
Oh. Interesting.
I didn't mean to trip you up too much.
It might have been a combination of the both, because a common thing that my parents would kind of like, maybe this isn't a normal parent thing. At least for my parents, there were
probably
certain...
not. If you're really questioning it, it's probably not.
Well, it was like, oh, you know how parents have those things where they are definitely resentful of each other and they constantly bring it up forever and kind of mention it in a snotty way. I don't think that's actually healthy at all. That's something I try not to do with you. Like, that's not healthy. That's resentful and crappy. So like they would bring up this argument, and in a joking way, but like very like mean at the same time. They would always bring this up around us. They were like, they always blamed each other for moving where we did and buying the house where we did. Like, so they both resented each other for all of us ending up there. I think it was definitely both of them, but like, you know, my dad is very convincing. Like, he would convince me that he would do all these things for me, and like, no matter how many times my dad failed me, the way he would make me believe it, he would manipulate me into believing it. And I was like, maybe my dad's changing, maybe my dad actually will do this thing this time. So I think that my mom, unfortunately, my mom's a bad person, but I don't want this to sound like I'm being hateful towards her, but she could be very delusional in her idea. She wasn't based in reality sometimes, a lot of times, with her thoughts of things that could happen or would happen, like, which made it really hard for me because it was really hard for me to understand what reality was and what real life was. And I would often get kind of convinced of things too. And that was the problem with my mom, is she's like, I mean, we were talking about this the other day, honey, where a few years ago, before I stopped talking to my mom, or it's been more than a few, but whenever I stopped talking to my mom, the year that I stopped talking to her, she was talking about how she was going to start an online. She had been selling online for years, but she was convinced that she could be bigger than Amazon.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like crazy, or I don't know, that's not a nice word. That's kind of a wild or outlandish thing to believe. And so that was kind of common with my mom, as she would believe these things that were just not even remotely achievable, especially, you know, with her being like having already had to file for bankruptcy earlier that year. You know,
Yeah.
like that was so, you're not a billionaire. Like that's not you don't have the means to compete with Amazon. So that was, I think it was a both of them thing for sure. But I think they fed into it with each other, and that made it worse. And then, you know, me being like a 10-11-year-old, I'm like, hell yeah, we're getting out of here, you know, it's gonna be great. So yeah, I think it was a little bit of both of them. And I think that my mom kind of needed to believe in it, because my mom had been really sick. I think I talked about in the last episode. Did I talk about
Yeah.
going to the hospital in the last episode with my mom? Okay.
You
I getting ready for this episode, some of it bleeds together for me. So, yeah, my mom had to go to the hospital for a stomach ulcer. And then, it was because of the Kingdom Hall, you know, and she hated it so much. And it was just like this super uncertain year in a lot of ways. So my mom was really sick, and I think she just needed to believe that this was going to work out. And I know I was struggling with school too. So this year, a new girl had moved in, into the class, which I think I had a new girl move in the last year too, which we'll talk more about her in a bit. But anyway, there was this new girl that had moved in. I remember she was like immediately like extremely popular because she was pretty. And I remember she just like had a problem with me from the get-go. Like she did not like me. I think it's because the guy that she was interested in, she ended up with him. Like they ended up being boyfriend, girlfriend, but he had like feelings for me. That might have been why she might have just not liked me because of that. But there were a few other things, but basically she would just like follow me around and just bully me like all the time. Like she would make fun of my clothes, like anything she could, like anything she could find to make fun of me, she would, like to the point I'd cry. And the problem was her mom had died of cancer. So if I called her out for being a bully, she would immediately use that as an excuse for her behavior. Like, oh, well, I don't remember. Like, she would say something mean, and if I kind of called her out for her bad behavior, she'd be like, you know, it's just really hard for me because my mom died of cancer, and like you're being mean to me because of that. And I'm like, you're bullying me. Like, it made me so mad. What?
Gaslighting too.
Yeah, for sure. It was not a good vibe. And I remember this one day she like followed me. We were going from art class and we had gotten to the gym, and she's like, my daddy said that I can punch you in your face if you don't leave me alone. And I was like, you're literally following me and my friend talking smack to me right now. I was like, what are you talking about? And I like turned around. I'm like, hey, you need to leave me the heck alone. I think I said something really hateful to her. Like, I do feel very awful about this. I think I called her ugly or something. I think I called her short and ugly, something like that. And that's not nice. And I definitely have fortunately grown as a person, and I don't believe in, body shaming no matter what. I think that if you're going to argue with someone or at least clap back, it shouldn't be about their body. And she was definitely not ugly. I don't understand why I thought making fun of her height was something I could do, seeing as I'm also very short. I think it was all I could think of in the moment. I just wanted to say something hurtful. I just want to say something that would be really hurtful, and I think I took advantage of the fact that I knew that as young AFAB people, that's a huge thing, is your appearance, and it wasn't nice. She did leave me alone after that, but I have always regretted that. I regretted it the minute it came out of my mouth. I immediately was just like, but she didn't really bother me after that. And side note, I couldn't really get her in trouble because she knew someone in this, like, she was related to someone in the school that had power. It was the same with this other girl that I'd gotten in a fight with that year, who would just do the same stuff. She was way bigger than all of us, so she was like, she could beat us up if she wanted to, which I did get into a physical fight with her when my teacher was out of the room one day. So it wasn't a good vibe. I was fighting for my life. Looking back, we were all kids just trying to do our best, and I think that's honestly why we were struggling. We were just kids. And I definitely don't hold it against them, and I hope the same for any of my bad behavior. We were just kids doing the best we could. But anyway, moving on. This year we had a different music teacher, aside from the other one that we went through. Disclaimer, trigger warning, not disclaimer, whatever. Brain, hello. Disclaimer. I forgot to put this in the start, so there is going to be a trigger warning for this portion. This is going to be a trigger warning for child sexual abuse. If this is something that is uncomfortable to you, I just, keep that in mind. I'm not going to be talking about anything too far in detail, but yeah. Anyway, new music teacher. He had moved to our school, and I remembered he would give me, like, very special attention. He also played the trumpet, so it was, like, something we connected over, and for our band concerts, I wasn't really allowed to go to most of them because they were holiday themed, but for the concerts that weren't, he gave me solos in them, or one specifically I remember the most is he gave me a solo. I think I did 2 concerts that year. One, I got the solo, and the second one I had, like, a special part with other people. But anyway, I got the solo, which I knew that I didn't deserve it. Our saxophone player definitely did. He was insanely talented. Like, I was decent at the trumpet, but he was actually really good. Genuinely good. And he also didn't have the stage fright that I did. So I remember feeling a little weird about that, and I remember he would also ask a lot of the, young girls, he would be like, hey, come see me after class, only the girls. And now, despite all the BS from my parents, one thing they told me that I was never allowed to do was be alone with an adult, even trusted ones, because you never know who could harm you, which...
I wonder why that's a thing.
The irony. We'll get to that. That'll come. The irony, though.
Fortress words.
You what?
Nothing.
Okay, I'm just gonna let that one go. So I wouldn't let my friends go see him alone because that was, like, a huge thing. I was like, I don't know about this. Like, it was a weird relationship with my teacher where I think something in my brain was like, something's off, but I also liked the attention. But I would always go with my friends, and so, like, usually when we'd arrive, he would be like, oh, it was nothing, or he'd make up, like, some small thing. He was just super odd. Like I said, I did like the attention, but there were just weird vibes there. But at the end of the year, he got sent to jail for having pornography of children. And I think there may have been some other charges there, but I know that specifically. And the real kicker here is that before he moved to our school, he had prior legal things at other schools, and our school hired him anyway. Which
That's just rough.
Which brings me to the teacher that I brought up last episode, our music teacher, who was now the choir teachers and the bus driver. So he would have kids over to his house all the time, usually little boys, and my mom would always kind of mention, hey, that's weird. And my cousin Denver that I've talked about would go over to his house too, and my mom kind of talked to my aunt. She's like, I don't think she let him go over to his house. Why is a teacher having little boys over to his house? But like, all the kids loved him and he was super nice. And his mom told my mom, that she was being paranoid. And one freaking time my mom is right about something, okay? Like, literally just the one time. Yeah, he got arrested for over 22 known accounts of child molestation. So we had the 2-for-1 special this year with bad teachers. Which also really made it really hard for my cousin. He was one of his victims, and he also got outed as gay this year, and it was not a good year for him. Like, it was really bad, and I've talked to my cousin about this time, as adults, and he's like, yeah, your mom literally made me feel like I was satanic or a demon spawn or something because I was gay, which my mom did. She really villainized my cousin, and it was awful. It was really terrible. I really we really had a tough time. All of us did. Why am I laughing? It's not funny. I guess if you don't laugh, you'll cry, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So I brought up that my friend that had moved in the year prior, I was going to talk about more in this episode. And that was because I think this was closer to the end of the year. She had come up to me and talked to me, and she said that she was having a really hard time at home. She said that she was being abused at home. She said that her mom wouldn't feed her. She told me how one day she got kicked out of the house when it was cold and raining, and all she had on was underwear. And she told me how she was hungry and how she had to go dig through the trash can for food. She told me some other things too, but this was the most vivid one that I remember. And she told me, she's like, I'm gonna go talk to the teachers and I'm gonna tell them what's happening. And this has always been something really sad to me. She talked about how this one specific teacher that she really liked in school was really nice to her, and she said, I think she'll adopt me. And she got really excited about it. She was fantasizing about how nice it would be to be adopted by her, and that she and her teacher could just have a nice, happy, safe life. And I didn't know a lot about how the world worked in certain ways, but I knew that that's not how that worked. But I didn't really have the heart to tell her that. And as far as I know, the teachers never really did anything for her, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just hope that things turned out okay for her. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids at my school were being horribly abused at home, and our teachers weren't great. I mean, obviously. I actually think about all the kids I grew up with a lot, and even the ones that bullied me or whatever happened, there's a reason, generally. And I just really hope that everybody makes it out on the other side okay. I do know I've heard some things about some of my classmates. Some are struggling with like addictions or being abusive themselves, or some of them had kids too soon and some didn't make it. And I really hope everybody turns out okay, and I hope that we all make it to better times. I do think that we still have time too, and that goes for anyone listening to this. Wherever you came from, there's still time, and I hope everybody does. So, including me.
Yes, you will.
I hope good things for everybody there. We were just kids, dude, and a lot of it's learned behavior, Anyway, we'll move on. So this same year, I had the same history from the year prior that I had talked about that I didn't really care about or care for, and she didn't really like me. And this was the year we were learning about World War II, and, about one of the things we talked about was how Jehovah's Witnesses were some of the people getting genocided during World War II. And I remember she specifically, I think this was one of those times where I kind of had a weird out-of-body experience, because I know I didn't sit at the front of the class, but for some reason in my brain, I remember, it felt like I was, in front of the class, and she was, talking down to me. But she singles me out during these lessons, and she said, yeah, I can't figure out if, because you have blonde hair and blue eyes, if you would have been raped and used to breed, or if because you're a Jehovah's Witness they would have genocided you. And I was like, oh my god, looking back, I'm like, what the hell was going on in that school?
Yeah, I don't even know. That one's speechless.
That was just a terrible thing to tell a child, which it sent me into this weird spiral. I was just feeling really distressed about it. I remember I decided I'd rather be genocided. I was like, yeah, I'd rather die. And I remember thinking, if this happens again, because this is a thing is, being a Jehovah's Witness, they're constantly telling you that someday people are going to turn on Jehovah's Witnesses, and probably the same thing is going to happen. And I remember thinking maybe I should dye my hair so that I don't think I fully grasped the Aryan race thing and exactly what I kind of tuned out a lot of it after that because of being told that, I didn't fully understand the concept of World War II at the time, and the racism at the time, because of what she told me. I was like, maybe if I dye my hair, maybe I should dye my hair a different color so this can't happen to me again. So that was a bad spiral for my little brain, and because I spent a lot of time thinking about how someday we're gonna get turned on, and how I needed to have enough faith in Jehovah that I wouldn't renounce his name. And I was just scared all the time. I was just really scared and anxious of when it would start, all the time. And I am so bad at segues. I was gonna segue. So this was the year that my dad's sister baby died too. Really not a great segue. I'm so sorry. If this is something you're sensitive to, we're going to be talking about this now. So this year, my dad's sister's baby died in a car accident. She had gotten in a car accident and lost the kid. And I had mentioned to this teacher too, I was like, that it had happened, because I think we went away, my dad and I went away for the weekend to go to the funeral. I remember during the class, she kind of knew what I believed in, and that we didn't believe that, you go to heaven after death. And she got in my face, and she's got like really loud, and she's like, she's gonna go to heaven and be one of God's little angels. And I didn't really know what to say. It just felt, I don't think that's a thing to say in a classroom either, especially where other beliefs could be a thing, because I think you've talked to me about how where you went to school, this kind of stuff wouldn't have been a thing, right?
Oh yeah, it definitely couldn't have been a fan because most of the time, you know, I probably grew up with every sort of religion, you know, so like you wouldn't be able to do that. Those people would be fired instantly.
Yeah, because separation of church and state.
Like we still had plenty of terrible teachers, but nothing in that type of thing.
Right. No, I believe
We
that
had a
for
lot
sure.
of teachers sleeping with students, like consensually, but like
Mm,
still,
I mean,
it
but
was
if
like
you're a student, it's not
yeah, that's
consensual.
what. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like it's not, yeah, necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, we had some of that too, but yeah, we'll get into that. Not that, just that I didn't remain at this school. I didn't really know what to say. I just didn't say
Yeah, I
anything.
was supposed to say, weren't you homeschooled? If I want to clarify that
Well, I
later.
wasn't gonna say
You're
that
like later
yet.
on.
I wasn't gonna say
I'm
that
sorry, a
yet.
little spoiler.
Oh my lord. Anyway, good golly
It's
molly.
like a it's like a crumb for what's to come.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be honest. I've been thinking about how to talk about my life after the 6th grade. I have not decided yet. Anyway, so my dad and I went for a weekend to basically where my dad grew up to go to the funeral. I don't know, it was just the two of us. I think part of the reason was because my mom's like, we need to stay back and make appearances at the Kingdom Hall and go out and service and take care of the banks. So my dad and I, it was just the two of us, which my dad and I were never close. He was very mean to me. My dad was always very big on me being more masculine. Like, if I was feminine or weak at all, that was like beat out of me. Like he would get mad at me if I wasn't as strong as him or my brother, which was absolutely crazy or wild because my dad is a carpenter and my brother was 2 years older than me. Of course, I'm not going to be as strong as them. Um, but anyway, like on the way up, it was a 5-hour drive, and we kind of like jammed out to music together, and we kind of talked about things that he was excited or passionate about. Looking back, I don't think I talked much about my interests, which that's kind of sad. But it was like the closest to it was. I would sometimes get glimpses of what it would be like to have a dad that was a good dad. And parts of this trip was kind of like that because he was really nice to me. And I also kind of like got a glimpse into his life. He had kept us from his life. I know my mom had more to do with them a little bit when they first got together, but in general, my dad separated us, at least from this part of his life. We talked to some of his other family that lived near us, but his mom's side is just a completely different world that I had nothing to do with. And so I got to meet my great grandma. She was this short little old woman. She smoked so much. I do not know how she lived to be as old as she was. I don't know. I think maybe stubbornness is what she was surviving off of. That's the only thing I can think of. And the house was so thick with smoke and just years of smoking, but I liked her. She was really cool. She had like so much personality. The only thing I knew of her before that was she would send packages to me as a kid because we were really poor. We couldn't afford clothes for my Barbie dolls, so she would make these beautiful clothes for my Barbie dolls, like these elaborate ball gowns, and she would send them to me. And I also met his mom. I didn't remember her because I had only ever really met her when I was a baby, and she had come up to visit, and if I'm not mistaken, my mom didn't want her around because she ended up stealing money from them. Oh my god, that's something my dad did to me. Holy crap, wait.
The cycle.
The cycle, bro. Like mother, like son. But she had always had a really bad problem with alcohol and being really, really heavily addicted to drugs. And she looked like it. Like, she was sober by the time we went up there. She smoked a lot of cigarettes, but she looked like, you know, she had been on drugs for years. There's a certain look that comes with that. And I met his sister, which I remember thinking she was really pretty. And she had this connection to me. She felt really connected to me because we had the same birthday, but I didn't feel connected to any of them because I had been kept away from them my whole life up to this point. And it was really weird because they loved me and wanted to know me, but because I was so disconnected from them, I didn't have those same feelings. And the stories I had been told was kind of polar opposite to the way they were treating me and the way they were treating my dad. It was a weird trip, and I think I was very quiet during a lot of it, just trying to process things, and I was also very shy and scared. And it's weird meeting people that feel like they know you but you don't know them, which I don't think they really knew me, but they knew me more than I knew them. And on this trip, I remember I was supposed to share a room and a bed with my dad in my dad's mom's house. And I had this feeling, like sickening feeling at the thought of it. Like, I'm like, I don't want to share a bed with my dad. I couldn't shake the feeling. I don't know. I feel like it should be normal to not feel weird about sharing a bed with your parents. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm a traumatized person. I mean, do you think it's weird to share a bed with, like a parent if that's all that's there?
Not really, but knowing your parents and some
Yeah, we're
later
not.
stuff,
Yeah,
it's
that.
probably why your body did that and
Yeah,
felt weird.
no,
I think that's probably
definitely.
why.
Well, I ended up making such a big deal about it. Like, I ended up having to sleep on a couch in the living room, which I didn't even sleep because it was just this. It was a weird trip, and the place was strange. I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I did about my dad. I felt kind of guilty or something. And I also had trouble sleeping because my dad's mom and her boyfriend were in the kitchen, like, talking, like, all night. And that was, like, 6 feet tops away from the couch because her house was really small. And it was just so weird because I had always heard these stories about my dad's childhood. He would talk about how his mom would come home strung out and she'd be like screaming, and like sometimes she would get a gun and start shooting at the walls and stuff because she thought someone was in there, and my dad would have to like hide under his bed so he wouldn't get shot. And it was just weird because then now I was in the house. I think this is, I don't know, it may not have been the house he grew up in. I'm not sure. I'm really unsure about that, but it was just weird being there. And she was really calm. Like, she was very calm, like, chilled out person, which I generally think happens to people that sober up, is they just kind of get, like, calmer. And I don't know, the whole trip felt really surreal. And then the next day was the funeral. I knew pretty much no one. And I remember I stuck by my dad because that's the only person I knew, which the problem with my dad is he didn't want to stick with me. He was like walking off, and I was just like, I am alone in a room full of strangers. And all these people are like, oh my God, hey man, what's up? Like, they know my dad. They're like, we haven't seen you in years. And I'm just like, who are these people? And the funeral was like an open casket. So that was
Rough.
Yeah. So they have us go up. And I remember there was like this ray of light shining down. It was like this small room had these windows, and light was like kind of streaming down directly onto the casket. And they made us go up to it. And there's this tiny, beautiful little baby laying in the casket. And it looked like she was asleep. And I don't guess I've ever probably really fully processed looking at the baby in the casket. It wasn't good. It was weird. The whole trip felt like a big weird dream. And all of a sudden I'm just like, I'm looking at this baby in this little dress, and his sister was crying over the baby. And I remember that his sister and the baby both had wounds from the wreck. Like, she had a gash on her head, but it, like the baby did, but it had been covered with makeup. You could still kind of see it a little bit. And I think that might have been how the baby got killed. Is this too dark to talk about? I don't.
It's your podcast. I mean, it is dark, but I mean, if it's something that impacted you, it's important to say.
I've never been able to get this out of my head, like the image. Like, I literally,
yeah, it's understandable.
I remember it, like, and I remember the dress, and like I said, I even specifically like how the sun was shining in, and I remember his sister would go from like crying, then she would, I think she was experiencing like every emotion that day, like the whole wide range of emotions, because like she was very also happy my dad was there, because that is something his sister and I had in common, was that we both just wanted our big brothers to be around for us, and we both didn't have that. And I know this is probably weird that I'm not referring to like my dad's mom as my grandma or his sister as my aunt, but I have never really viewed them like that because they didn't feel like my family. My dad had done such a good job of separating us from his family, so I didn't feel connected to them. And then after viewing the baby, we had the funeral where they took us to this other room. It was like this weird glass box where close family members sat in it, off to the side of the stage where the speaker was, and then the rest of the audience in front of them. It was so weird. And I remember thinking the funeral was weird because the speaker just kind of kept talking about himself, and then he wouldn't like finish a sentence. Like, it was so weird. And then she also, her son, the older brother, he sat by my dad and I. We watched him, and my dad and I didn't really have much emotion for the whole thing. I felt like, I think I may have dissociated a lot, and my dad just didn't really. My dad doesn't really experience a lot of like emotions unless it's happiness or anger. You know, I do wonder if it was hard for my dad to be back. Like, I know my dad was trying to be charismatic, whatever, but he was back in his hometown where he had gotten very traumatized as a kid, you know? So, I don't know. I feel like it must have been hard for him. Hard to say. It's hard to say with my dad. So, after the funeral, we went to someone else's house. I think it was maybe my dad's sister's grandma's house. It was so, I don't remember. It was someone else in the family's house. There were tons of people there, and of course like tons of food. And I remember I got chosen to watch over the other kids, like the little ones, and which I was just trying to process things, but then I had to be like the entertainer for these kids. It felt like I was in a different timeline. I don't really know how to describe it. It just, I remember it was a super sunny day, and it was either in the fall or spring because it was still like a little bit chilly. I didn't feel like I was in my body. It was like I was looking at all of these people through a very sad lens. Everything was just very sad, and which makes sense. And then it was also kind of like there was a warmth there because it felt like everyone felt comfortable being their messy selves around each other and still accepted each other for that. And it felt like my dad really stood out too. It was like I don't know. It was weird. It was probably the closest I've ever seen my dad be a normal person, I guess. And normal is not exactly the word I mean. I think that normal is one of those words that's misused a lot, but at least a real human, like the most human I had ever seen my dad. Do you think that makes sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. And I remember by the time we got back home, we didn't talk much about anything except the funeral. And it felt like as we drove back home, it was like every mile we went, my dad was putting a new brick up to put those walls back up. It was like he was just building those walls up. Like every mile further we got towards home, those bricks were going up, the walls were going back up. And I don't think I'm ever gonna know who my dad is for real, which, knowing what I know now, that's enough, because it doesn't matter at this point, because I don't need to know my dad anymore. What I do know, I don't know, it's weird. This is something weird with me, where despite all of the terrible things my dad has done to me, I think some part of me feels very sad for little him. Because he had told us all these like really sad stories from his childhood, and usually he would cloak it in laughter or jokes, and he would tell these terrible stories like they were funny, like talking about how kids would hunt him down with knives and stuff and threaten to hurt him, after school. Like, he would make it like these stories were funny, and they're not. And both of my parents had really bad childhoods. But at the end of the day, that does not excuse you or excuse your bad behavior or the things that you've done. And I think that's part of why I don't want kids, because I want this cycle to end with me. Like, I want my bloodline to end with me. And I think that's valid. Because I don't think my brother Stone's ever going to have kids, and unfortunately my eldest brother and his partner can't have kids. So, yeah, I think ends with me. At least this part of our family will, and I'm happy for that. But, yeah, I went back to school, and that was just kind of it of the trip. I know there's probably a lot of things I'm not remembering about that trip, but something I've kind of learned about my like repressed memories is most of them I'm good. I don't need to remember them. Anytime I have remembered them, they're just awful. I'm good. I'm okay. We're good. We'll leave those in the past. Like I mentioned earlier, I remember I got really bullied a lot at school. This was every year at school. Like I said, I think it was just a bunch of abused children in a very volatile environment, just trying to do their best. And there was this one boy that I had grown up with. We'd been in school together from kindergarten till now. And we were bus mates on this school, or on the bus. Like, they had assigned seating. They had decided to put that in one year, and so we got assigned next to each other. And I remember we were only friends with each other when we were on the bus. And it was because he was popular, and I also didn't want my friends knowing that I was hanging out with him because he was a jerk. But he was really, really nice to me when we were on the bus. But outside of that, he was really mean to me and everyone else. So, which our friendship had ended before this grade, because I think it ended in like 3rd or 4th grade. Which we had stopped being busmates and friends because he had bullied me really bad on the bus because of another kid that had come up, and they were just horrible to me. So I asked for a different person to be sat with, which I think hurt his feelings. Which I think it worked out for the best, because I actually ended up meeting one of my friends that I'm still friends with to this day. So I think it all worked out anyway. But I remember he was really hateful this year, the kid that had been my prior busmate. I'm doing really bad at telling my story right now. I don't know why. I'm just
You're good. Just You got
self-conscious or
this.
something. It's hard stuff to talk about, I guess. Am I doing okay?
You're doing fine. You got this.
Okay. I just need moral support. Um, so one day in class, so he was in the same grade as me. He came up behind me, and for no reason, just fully unprompted, he grabs me by the back of my head and slams my face into a computer screen, which this was back in the day when computer monitors were those giant boxes with the thick glass screens. Like,
Thick.
yuck. Getting your head smashed into that
Oh,
is
that's why you said it.
I didn't mean to. Yuck. He smashed it into that, which really pissed me off. So when he sat back down, I got up and did the same thing to him, because I'm like, no, you're not gonna do that. Of course, he didn't like it. It embarrassed him like it did me, and it hurt. And this year I had kind of gotten more angry and aggressive, I think, as a person, which kind of was very similar to my dad. I did a lot of things that I felt like were similar to my dad because I didn't like myself. And I would do stuff to make other kids think I was cool or to make people like me. And I kind of understood my dad a little bit more this year. And I understood why my dad did some of the things, because my dad would even do things to physically harm or embarrass my brother and I if it made him look cool in front of other people. A grown man acting like that. He would put us in danger or in harm's way to seem cool. Which I think you've seen that before, Japan. Like, remember that time he took me on the 4-wheeler on the ice and I was terrified and I told him not to do it and he was drunk and he did it to look cool.
Unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was not a good day. We'll talk about that at some point. But I got it because it was so much easier to protect myself if I was like this. And I remember my brother was having a really bad year at school too. He was getting bullied a lot. And I remember he was getting in a lot of trouble with his teachers because he wasn't trying. Like, he would go to their class during even tests and he would just pull out his book and read it instead of paying attention, which my brother and I were both kind of bookworms, and I still am, but he wouldn't put them down. And I think it was the only way that he could find a way to escape everything. That was my brother's way of not dealing with life. And he would consume as many books as he could get his hands on. And I don't think I can express how much my heart aches for him and for me when we were kids. Nothing could make him care about anything. And I always kind of envied that he was able to shut off his emotions and not care and not be scared of getting in trouble. Like, he wasn't scared. And I think it's because he wasn't living in the real world. Like, he just cared about his books. Like, I genuinely believe that if someone was like, "We'll kill your sibling or burn all your books," he would give me up in a heartbeat.
Oh, for sure.
Which is sad. But our life was pretty ass, and I get it. And I also get it because that's kind of what I would do with writing, you know. I did it with books too, but I did it more with writing or like any artistic endeavors I had. And I wanted so badly to be good at writing.
And you were.
Not like other people. I wanted to be extraordinary. I just wanted it so bad. And I wasn't at that level. And I wanted it. I do think about, though, if I was my parent and if I could just go back and grab little baby me up, I would just love me and make me safe, you know. I wish I could.
You did it.
But yeah, I did whatever I could to appear like other kids. I really couldn't put my finger on why I wasn't it just felt like everyone else was living a different life than me, or they were on a different wavelength, or they were on a different, were onto something, and just nobody was telling me what it was, which that was definitely the autism. And I think this is when I was really getting better at masking. And I had a lot of ups and downs with my friends this year too. Like, I remember, so for no reason, a group of my friends came up to me, and my boyfriend at the time, the one that I got with a fart, oh my gosh, they came up to me on the playground when we were hanging out, and they got in my face, and they were like, "Hey, we don't want to be your friend anymore." And I was like, "Why?" And they're like, "We just feel like it." And they just, like, walked away. And I was like, "I don't care." And, I'm pretending like I don't care. I don't care. But, of course, I cared. And when I got home, I cried so much. It hurt my feelings so much. And, I've talked about I didn't tell my parents anything. I would usually go home and sleep. So that's what I did. I fell asleep. And I remember I didn't get to sleep for long because my dad got home one of the days where he got home early from work at a normal, reasonable hour, because he had a truckload full of wood for the wood stove that we needed to chop, or that we needed to stack up. I think some of we had to chop, but we had to stack it up. And he got home, and he comes into my room, and he starts screaming at me. He's like, "You're just being lazy. You're faking being asleep because you didn't want to have to unload the wood." Because I'd forgotten we were supposed to do that day. And, I mean, I didn't feel comfortable telling my dad what was wrong. And it would piss me off when my parents would accuse me of stuff like that, because I was never the kid to try to get myself out of work. My brother definitely was. He would fake anything to get out of school or work or anything, but I wouldn't. I would do the work, so it pissed me off that I was being held to that same standard. But I do have to say, my mom had a shining moment of actually being a good mom. She had come into my room, she's like, "What's going on?" And I ended up crying, and I told her what happened, and she's like, "You know what, I'll deal with your dad. You rest, you hang out." And, which, of course, my brother and my dad were mad at me and didn't believe me, that it mattered that much. But, actually, my mom ended up leaving, like, a really nice card on my pillow. She had gone out the next day and gotten it for me, and she left me a nice little card on my pillow that was like, "I always want to be your friend." And I still have that card somewhere. My mom had the ability to sometimes be a good mom, which definitely gets outshined, but what we will talk about later in the podcast. So also stuff with being Jehovah's Witness was getting worse. My parents were kind of talking about maybe going to a different congregation around this time. I really just don't know why. Like, I don't know how many red flags you gotta be slapped with to cut ties, because my God, I just, honestly, crazy, wild that they didn't cut ties with this religion. So not long before, I think right before the end of the school year, we changed Kingdom Halls. And I remember there were no kids in this Kingdom Hall. It was all elderly people. So, and my mom kind of did it just like just fully cut contact. I didn't get to say goodbye to my friends. It's kind of what she had done with our family. She had cut ties with them. And the problem with the new Kingdom Hall is it was the opposite way of where the old one was, which made things even more difficult, because the reason my mom had gotten the job cleaning the banks where she had was because it was near the Kingdom Hall. So now it was the opposite way, and she had to drive really far to go clean the banks after the meeting, so she would get home really late. And my brother and I originally were only helping my mom clean the banks on Fridays because she paid us for that, but I felt really bad that my mom had to clean them so late. So on other meeting nights, I started going with my mom. So Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday nights, I was helping her clean. And she had also picked up another bank to clean in another town where we would only do, I can't remember if it was once or twice a week. and we were getting home like super duper late. Like super late. I If I were my parent, I would have been like, this is my job, you go home and rest. Like, she shouldn't have let me go
Yeah,
with her, you know.
definitely not.
It was her job. I don't know, it just, but I just felt so bad, you know. So I'm going to school full time, being a Jehovah's Witness for another portion, and then doing this, which I was already struggling. I really shouldn't have been doing that with my mom. And dude, I still have nightmares about cleaning those banks. Like, I'll have these nightmares where I'm doing, like, I'll have these nightmares where it's like I'm living my life and I'm doing other things, and I'll randomly remember, oh, we have to go clean the banks, and then we'll have to like go rush to clean them before the banks open. You okay?
Yep, my phone just fell over on accident.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You're good. It was just, I didn't know I heard something. So I'll just have like nightmares about that a lot. Like, even now, even however many years down the line, I can't shake those nightmares. And I'm not good at segues, but I'm about to talk about something really depressing, so we're just gonna do it. So at the end of that school year, it was like a few days before the very last day of school, I got home one day, and I remember I loved when I got home just going out and being in nature. Like, I've always loved nature. I would go outside and play, or like, generally it would consist of me laying on the ground and watching the clouds, and I think that was just a way for me to turn my brain off and just for a minute just stop. And I had gotten home and I was outside, and my mom came up to me and she said, "You are never going to school again." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "That's it. You are never going to that school again. I'm gonna homeschool you." And I didn't get to say goodbye to any of my friends. These are kids that I had spent my whole life around. Like, we grew up together. And despite all the bullying, this school and my friends there were my lifeline. They were the only people I had. I didn't have family. I didn't have friends at the Kingdom Hall because there were no kids at the new Kingdom Hall we were going to. And I remember it felt like my life was over. It felt, you know, because as a kid, everything feels permanent. And she was shutting me off from everything I had ever known. She had done that with our family. She had done that at the other Kingdom Hall. And now she was doing it here. And I was so mad. I think I hated my mom. She didn't even give me a chance to say goodbye. I didn't get to go get like their phone numbers or anything. And I remember I just did not want to even live anymore. And any friends that I did have the phone numbers of, my mom would guilt me into not being friends with them because they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. She told me that I needed to grow up and make a decision to either put God first and to figure out what Jehovah would want. And she also made me do that with my friend up on the hill. I remember we hung out for a little bit longer that summer. She would sometimes like come over for dinner, and I would be like, "You should go to the meeting with us." But anytime I would invite her, she would call her parents to ask, and then she was also being abused, to be fair, but she would get this look on her face, like, sick to her tummy look. And she's like, I have a family emergency, I have to go. And so she would just go back to the house, and I do remember the last time she ever came to my house. She had come to, like, the front porch and left a bag that I had let her borrow. She had knocked, but I was trying to go to the door and I didn't get there in time, and she had just left it with like a little note. And I remember I rushed out to the woods between our houses and I tried to call out for her, but she was gone, and that was pretty much it. I just felt alone and I felt isolated, and I just feel like this was the end of a lot of things for me because I couldn't go to school and escape home. I didn't have friends. All I had was my mom, my dad, and my brother, and that was it. And it was just a really dark time. I feel like this was a huge turning point in life for me, and it was really tough. It wasn't fair. But I think this is a good place to leave the episode. I think that was most
Good
of
episode.
kind of what I wanted to cover. um, from that year of school. And yeah, it was rough. It was a really tough year. As far as my mom taking me out of school, there were reasons. You know, she was like, oh, it's hard for you guys to be Jehovah's Witnesses. My brother was really struggling with school. I was struggling with school, but my parents didn't know. They didn't know how much I was struggling with school. I was really good at hiding it, and I good at faking grades and just getting by. Um, yeah, I was just really, really mad. Really mad at my mom for that. It was just, it was tough. It was tough. But we'll get into that in the next episode. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out. I know that a lot of the topics I cover here are very dark and sad, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been really tough, and I really struggle with a lot of it still, but I think the positivity that can come out of this is that hopefully other people that maybe have gone through something similar feel less alone. It helps me get it out of my body and out of my system, and I think it's important to talk about the not good things in life. I really do. I think it's very important too. But thank you guys so much for listening. Really, I appreciate it. Make sure if you guys would like a palate cleanser to give Japan a follow. I'll put his information in the description. I play a lot of games with him on his stream, and there's a lot of clips of us being goofy and just being happy. So I think it's a good palate cleansing time. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you give him a follow. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you aren't already following me, or what is it on YouTube? Subscribe to me. Make sure you do so you can catch the new episodes every Sunday. Anyway, I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.